I was standing by the espresso machine in the break room, the hum of the office buzzing softly around me when everything changed. It was just another Tuesday at Alvarez Designs, the company I'd poured 15 years of my life into. I swirled a splash of almond milk into my coffee, watching the steam curl up, thinking about the day ahead, finalizing sketches for a new client, tweaking the Luxhaven project. That's when Mateo Alvarez strolled in. Not walked, strolled like he owned the place. Which, I guess he did now. His dad, Victor, had built this company from a tiny workshop into a name that meant something in the high-end design world, and I'd been there for most of that ride. But Victor was retired now, and Mateo, all 29 years of him, was the new king of the castle. He didn't say good morning, didn't even glance at the coffee I offered to pour him. Just stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at me like I was a piece of outdated furniture he'd inherited and didn't know what to do with. "Elena," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut through the chatter outside the break room, "I need you in the conference room, now." It wasn't a question. I set my mug down, the warmth still clinging to my fingers, and followed him. My stomach tightened a little, but I brushed it off. 15 years here, designing showrooms, hotels, penthouses, had taught me to roll with the punches. I'd built half this company's reputation with my own hands. Late nights, sketching until my eyes burned, weekends spent sourcing rare materials. Whatever Mateo wanted, I could handle it. The conference room was empty when we got there, just a long glass table reflecting the skyline outside. Mateo didn't sit. He leaned against the edge, arms crossed, his dark hair slicked back, like he'd spent more time on it than on the company books. I stood across from him, waiting. "Look," he started, not even meeting my eyes, "things are changing around here. We're moving in a new direction, and honestly, we don't need people like you holding us back." I blinked. The words didn't sink in at first. They just floated there, heavy and wrong. "What are you saying?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He finally looked up, a smirk tugging at his mouth. "You're fired, Elena. Effective immediately. Pack your stuff and go." For a second, I couldn't breathe. 15 years. Gone, just like that. I'd designed the very room we were standing in, picked the walnut paneling, the custom lighting that made clients gasp when they walked in. I'd trained half the team out there, negotiated deals that kept us afloat when the recession hit. And now this kid, who'd barely been out of college when I was winning awards for Victor, was tossing me out like yesterday's trash? "Why?" I managed to ask, though my throat felt tight. He shrugged, scrolling through his phone like he was already bored. "You're outdated. We need fresh blood, not someone stuck in the past." I could have yelled, could have listed every project I'd saved, every client I'd won over, but instead something clicked inside me, a quiet, cold certainty. I straightened up, smoothed my jacket, and gave him a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "All right, Mateo," I said. "Good luck with that." His head snapped up, maybe expecting a fight, but I didn't give him one. I turned and walked out, my heels clicking on the hardwood I'd chosen myself, feeling the weight of every eye in the office on me as I passed. They knew something was up. A few started to stand, mouths opening with questions, but I just shook my head. Not now. Driving home, the city blurred past my windshield and memories hit me like waves. 15 years. I'd given Alvarez Designs more than I'd given my own life. Skipped vacations, worked through heartbreak, turned down offers from rivals because Victor had believed in me. And now? Now I was nothing to them, or at least to Mateo. But as the shock faded, a question started gnawing at me. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Mateo had just lit a match without knowing the fire was already under his feet. The silence in my apartment that night was deafening. I sat on my couch, still in the same blazer I'd worn to the office, staring at the coffee table where I'd left my untouched mug from the morning. 15 years at Alvarez Designs, and it ended with a shrug and a smirk from Mateo Alvarez. I kept replaying it in my head. His casual, "you're fired," the way he didn't even look up from his phone, like I was an email he'd just deleted. I'd spent half my life building that company's name, turning Victor's vision into something real, something people paid millions for. And now I was outdated, according to a guy who'd probably never held a pencil longer than it took to sign his trust fund checks. I wanted to be furious. Part of me was. My hands shook as I unpacked my desk stuff from the box I'd carried out, the little things I'd kept there, a framed award from 2012, a sketch of the first showroom I'd designed, a thank you note from Victor after we landed a big hotel chain. But the anger didn't stick. It kept slipping into something else. Confusion, maybe. Even curiosity. Why me? Why now? I'd just finished the initial designs for Luxhaven, a $20 million hotel project that was supposed to be our crown jewel. I'd been up until 3 a.m. last week perfecting the lobby layout, weaving in those sustainable materials the client loved. Mateo couldn't have picked a worse time to cut me loose. Or could he? I tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't shut off. I kept seeing his face, that smug little twist of his lips when he said fresh blood. He didn't know me, didn't know I'd once talked a client out of walking away over a botched delivery, or that I'd sourced hand-carved tiles from a tiny village in Morocco to win a pitch. He didn't know because he'd never bothered to look. Victor had hired me at 23, fresh out of design school, after I'd pitched him a crazy idea for a pop-up gallery. He'd seen something in me, trusted me to grow with him. Mateo, he saw a 38-year-old woman he could erase to make room for whatever shiny new thing he had in mind. The next morning, my phone buzzed just as I was pouring a second cup of coffee. I didn't recognize the number, and for a moment I let it ring, half expecting some HR follow-up about my exit paperwork. But something made me pick up. "Elena? It's Victor." His voice hit me like a punch, gruff, familiar, the same tone he'd used to chew out suppliers back in the day. "What the hell happened? I walked into the office today and your desk's empty. Why do you pack up and leave?" I froze, coffee sloshing over the rim of my mug. "Victor, I didn't leave. Mateo fired me yesterday, said I was holding the company back." There was a long pause, the kind that makes your chest tighten, then a sharp breath, like he'd just bitten into something sour. "He did what?" I could hear the disbelief, the edge of panic creeping in. "He told me I was outdated, that they needed fresh blood." I was out the door by noon. Another silence, longer this time, and I swear I heard him mutter something under his breath, probably a curse Mateo wouldn't want to hear. "Elena," he said finally, slow and deliberate, "did he even look at your contract, the Luxhaven deal?" I frowned, setting the mug down. "What do you mean?" "Luxhaven," he snapped, like I should have known. "That project's locked under your name. You're the only one with the design rights, legal, binding rights. I put that clause in there myself after the Meridian mess 5 years ago when we almost lost everything to a competitor. Mateo can't touch it without you." My heart skipped. I'd forgotten about that clause, buried in the fine print, a safeguard Victor had insisted on after Ascendant saw me add it in. It was there, plain as day. I owned the intellectual property for Luxhaven. Mateo, in his rush to play CEO, hadn't checked. He'd fired the one person who could make or break the biggest deal in the company's history. I leaned back against the counter, a slow grin spreading across my face. "So you're saying he can't close it without me?" Victor groaned. And I heard a thud, like he'd slammed his fist on his desk. "Exactly. The client's coming in tomorrow, and Mateo's out there thinking he's got it handled. Jesus, Elena, he's screwed us." I didn't say anything for a second, letting it sink in. The shock was fading, replaced by something sharper, something alive. Mateo hadn't just fired me. He'd handed me the keys to his downfall. I took a sip of my coffee, still warm, and said, "Well, Victor, looks like your son's about to learn a very expensive lesson." I didn't sleep much that night after Victor's call. My apartment felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses in on you, makes every thought louder. I kept turning it over in my head. Mateo firing me, Victor's voice cracking with panic, that clause in my contract I'd almost forgotten about. 15 years at Alvarez Designs, and I'd never thought I'd be the one holding the winning card. Luxhaven wasn't just a project, it was the project. A $20 million deal that could put us on the map for good. I'd spent months on it, sketching late into the night, meeting with the client's team until I knew their tastes better than they did, and now Mateo, with his slick hair and his big ego, thought he could waltz in and take it over without me? Good luck, kid. By morning, I was wired on coffee and adrenaline, pacing my living room when my phone buzzed again. It was Victor, sounding like he hadn't slept either. "Elena, it's a mess," he said, his voice rough. "Mateo's in the office right now, prepping for the Luxhaven meeting. The client's due at 11 and he's got no idea what he's walking into." I glanced at the clock. 9:15. "Did you tell him?" I asked, keeping my tone even. Victor sighed, heavy and tired. "I tried." He brushed me off, said he's got it under control. "He's got some junior designer pulling your files, acting like he can just swap you out." I almost laughed. My files? Those were my designs. Every line, every curve, every damn fabric swatch. I'd locked the intellectual property down tight after the Meridian fiasco, when a rival tried to poach one of my concepts. Victor had made sure of it, scribbling that clause into my contract himself. Mateo could have my notes, my sketches, my whole damn office, but without my signature he couldn't legally present a thing to Luxhaven. "So what's he planning?" I asked, leaning against the window watching the city wake up below me. "He's bluffing," Victor said. "Thinks he can charm them, wing it. I'd drag him out of there myself, but I'm stuck across town with a supplier. Elena, this is bad." Bad for him, maybe. For me? It was starting to feel like an opportunity. I took a slow breath, letting the pieces fall into place. "Victor, let him try," I said. "Let's see how far he gets." There was a pause, like he wasn't sure he'd heard me right. "You're serious?" he asked. "Dead serious," I replied. "He wanted me gone." "Let him figure out what that costs." Victor didn't argue, just muttered something about needing a drink and hung up. I set my phone down and smiled. A real one this time, not the tight-lipped mask I'd worn yesterday. Mateo was about to crash and burn, and I wasn't lifting a finger to stop it. The next few hours crawled by. I didn't call anyone, didn't check in. I just waited, sipping cold coffee, flipping through an old design magazine without really seeing it. At 11:30, my phone lit up. A text from Carla, one of the project coordinators I'd mentored years ago. "Elena, you need to hear this," it read. "Mateo just tanked the Luxhaven meeting. Client walked out." My pulse kicked up, but I kept my cool, texting back, "What happened?" Her reply came fast. "He showed up with your designs, tried to pass them off. Client asked for you, said they only deal with the lead designer. Mateo stammered, said you'd left the company. They shut it down, said no signature, no deal." I leaned back on the couch, letting that sink in. The client, Luxhaven's CEO, a sharp woman named Priya who loved my eco-friendly touches, hadn't budged. She'd told me once over drinks that she trusted me because I listened. Really listened. Mateo didn't stand a chance. I could picture him now, sweating through his tailored suit, fumbling for excuses while Priya's team packed up their briefcases. Carla texted again. He's freaking out. Locked himself in the conference room. Victor's on his way back. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The dominoes were falling, and I hadn't even pushed the first one. By noon, Victor called again, his voice a mix of relief and fury. "Elena, it's worse than I thought," he said. "Priya called me personally. She's pissed, said if you're not back by tomorrow, they're pulling the deal entirely. Mateo didn't just screw up, he made us look like amateurs." I stayed quiet for a second, letting him stew. "What did he say after?" I asked. Victor snorted. "He's blaming everyone else, said the junior designer gave him bad info, said Priya's being unreasonable. I chewed him out, told him he's got no business running anything if he can't read a contract." I walked to the window again, the skyline steady and indifferent outside. "Victor," I said, keeping my voice calm, "he didn't just miss the contract, he missed me. 15 years and he thought I was disposable. What's he doing now?" Victor hesitated. "He's on the phone, probably begging someone to fix it." "Elena, I hate asking this, but—" "Don't," I cut him off. "I'm not running back to clean up his mess. Not yet." He didn't push. "Fair enough," he said. "But this isn't over. Luxhaven's still on the table, and you're the only one who can save it." I hung up and stood there, the weight of it settling in my chest. Mateo had swung hard, missed harder, and now the ball was in my court. But I wasn't ready to play. Not until I knew exactly how much he'd lose. I'd given Alvarez Designs everything, my 20s, my 30s, my best ideas. And Mateo thought he could erase me with a wave of his hand? He didn't know I was the foundation he'd just kicked out from under himself, and he didn't know how deep this could go. I grabbed my jacket, suddenly restless. Something told me the real fallout was still coming, and when it hit, I'd be ready. The afternoon dragged on, heavy and thick, like the air before a storm. I didn't turn on the TV or check my email, just sat there on my couch, the city humming outside, waiting for the next shoe to drop. Victor's call had left me buzzing, not with anger anymore, but with something sharper, something alive. Mateo had tanked the Luxhaven meeting, and I could have left it at that, let him drown in his own mess. But I knew him, or at least guys like him. He wouldn't just sit there and take the hit. He'd scramble, claw his way out, even if it meant dragging everyone else down with him. And that's exactly what he did. Around 2 p.m. my phone buzzed again. It was Carla. Her voice low and rushed when I picked up. "Elena, you're not going to believe this," she said. "Mateo's losing it. After the client walked out, he started yelling at everyone. Blamed me, blamed the design team, even blamed the damn coffee machine. Then he locked himself in Victor's office with his laptop. I just overheard him on a call through the door. I sat up straighter, my pulse ticking up. Who was he talking to? I asked. Carla hesitated, like she didn't want to say it out loud. Evan Pierce. From Pierce & Co. My stomach dropped. Pierce & Co. wasn't just a competitor. They were the sharks we'd been dodging for years. Back when I was still proving myself, they'd tried to poach me after the Meridian project, offering double my salary to jump ship. I'd said no. Stuck with Victor because he'd given me a shot when no one else would. Evan, their CEO, was ruthless, smooth-talking, but the kind of guy who'd smile while he stabbed you in the back. What did Mateo say? I pressed, my voice tight. Carla swallowed hard. He was offering them something. Said he could make up for Luxhaven if they cut him a deal. Elena, I think he's trying to sell your designs. I stood up, pacing now, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. He can't, I said, more to myself than to her. The contract locks me as the owner. He's got no rights to— That's the thing, Carla cut in. He wasn't just talking about Luxhaven. He mentioned the expansion plans, the ones you and Victor worked on for the new markets. Said he'd hand over everything we've got if they'd back him up. My blood ran cold. The expansion plans weren't public yet. A 5-year strategy to take Alvarez Designs global, targeting boutique hotels in Europe and Asia. I'd spent years on it, mapping out every detail with Victor, keeping it under wraps until we were ready. It was our ace, our future, and Mateo was dangling it like a cheap bargaining chip. I stopped pacing, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. "Carla, are you sure?" I asked. "Swear to God," she whispered. "I heard him say Pierce can have it all, just get me out of this." "He's panicking, Elena. Victor's not back yet, and Mateo's acting like he's the only one left in charge." I closed my eyes, forcing myself to breathe. This wasn't just a screw-up anymore. This was betrayal. Mateo wasn't content to lose Luxhaven. He was ready to sell the soul of the company to save his own skin. And he didn't even know how deep he'd dug himself. I thanked Carla, told her to keep her head down, and hung up. My mind was racing, piecing it together. Mateo didn't have the authority to sell anything, not legally. But if he sent Pierce those files, even a fragment of them, it'd be a disaster. They could claim we'd breached confidentiality, sue us into the ground, or worse, steal the plans and beat us to the punch. I'd seen Evan pull stunts like that before, twist a handshake into a chokehold, and Mateo, with his big mouth and bigger ego, had just handed him the rope. I was still reeling when Victor called at 3:30, his voice shaking with rage. "Elena, we're screwed," he said, no preamble. "I just got an email. An anonymous tip saying Mateo's been in touch with Pierce & Co. Said he's offering them proprietary info. Tell me this isn't happening." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "It's happening," I said. "Carla overheard him. He's trying to trade the expansion plans to cover his ass on Luxhaven." Victor swore, loud and long, a string of words I hadn't heard from him since the early days. "That idiot," he spat. "I gave him one shot, one, and he's burning the whole damn house down. Elena, I need you back, now." I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to let it collapse, let Mateo's stupidity bury him and leave me free to walk away. But then I thought of Victor, gruff, stubborn Victor, who'd bet on me when I was a nobody, and the team, Carla, the juniors I'd trained, the ones who'd stuck it out through lean years. This wasn't just about me anymore. "I'll come back," I said finally, "but on my terms. I want full control of Luxhaven, and Mateo's out, no negotiation." Victor didn't hesitate. "Done, just get here. We've got maybe a day before Pierce moves." I hung up and stood there, staring at nothing. Mateo hadn't just fired me, he'd tried to erase me, then sold out everything I'd built when the walls closed in. He thought he was playing a game, but he'd lit a match in a room full of gasoline. And now? Now I was the one holding the extinguisher, or the accelerant, depending on how I played it. I grabbed my keys, my mind already shifting gears. Luxhaven was still salvageable, but the expansion plans? If Pierce had them, we were toast. Mateo didn't know it yet, but he'd just handed me the power to save the company. Or watch it burn, and I hadn't decided which I'd choose. My phone buzzed again as I headed for the door. Mateo's number this time. I let it ring, watching his name flash on the screen. He'd probably figured out Luxhaven was a bust, maybe even realized he'd overplayed his hand with Pierce. I didn't pick up, let him sweat. I slipped on my jacket, the one I'd worn yesterday when I walked out, and headed for the car. The office was about to get real interesting, and I wasn't showing up as the Elena they'd kicked out. This time, I was coming back as the one they couldn't afford to lose. The drive to the office felt different this time. The city blurred past my windshield, all steel and glass, but I wasn't the same woman who'd left yesterday, shaken and silent. My hands were steady on the wheel, my jaw set. Matteo had fired me, tried to sell out the company, and now I was walking back in, not to beg, but to take control. I didn't use the staff entrance when I got there. I strode through the main lobby, heels clicking on the marble I'd picked out 6 years ago for a renovation. Heads turned, reception, the interns, even a couple of clients in the waiting area. They all knew I'd been axed. My return wasn't quiet, and I didn't want it to be. Carla met me by the elevators, her eyes wide. "Elena, thank God you're here," she whispered, falling into step beside me. "Victor's upstairs with the board. Matteo's still in his dad's office on the phone again. I think he's doubling down with Pierce." I nodded, keeping my pace brisk. "He won't get far," I said. "Not if I've got anything to say about it." The elevator dinged and we stepped in. Carla fidgeted, twisting her hands. "You sure about this? He's unhinged, yelling at everyone, slamming doors." I gave her a small, tight smile. "Good. Let him unravel. Makes my job easier." The top floor was chaos when we got there. Phones ringing, voices overlapping, the kind of tension you could feel in your bones. Victor had called an emergency board meeting, and I could see them through the glass walls of the conference room, suits and stern faces flipping through papers. But my eyes went straight to Matteo. He was pacing outside Victor's office, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand raking through his hair. He looked like a cornered animal, red-faced, wild-eyed. Then he saw me. His mouth dropped open mid-sentence, and he hung up, shoving the phone in his pocket as he stormed over. "What the hell are you doing here?" he snapped, loud enough that heads turned. I didn't flinch. "Funny," I said, crossing my arms. "I was about to ask you the same thing. Still trying to sell us out to Pierce?" His face twitched, a flicker of panic before he covered it with a sneer. "You don't know what you're talking about. This is my company now, Elena. You're done." I stepped closer, voice low and steady. "Your company? You couldn't even keep Luxhaven on the table for 24 hours. And those expansion plans you fed to Evan Pierce? That's not just stupid, it's illegal. You're finished, Matteo." He opened his mouth to argue, but Victor's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Enough!" He'd stepped out of the conference room, his face a storm cloud, and marched toward us. Matteo spun to face him. "Dad, she's lying. She's the one who walked out, left us high and dry." Victor didn't even look at him, his eyes locked on me. "Elena, you got everything?" I pulled a USB drive from my pocket. Emails I'd saved, the Luxhaven contract, a recording of Victor's call from earlier. "All here," I said. "And Carla's got the logs of his calls to Pierce." Matteo's sneer faltered, his gaze darting between us. Victor took the drive and turned to Matteo. "You've got 10 seconds to explain why I shouldn't drag you out of here myself," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Matteo stammered. I was fixing it. Luxhaven fell through because of her, and Pierce offered to bury us," I cut in. "You handed him our future because you couldn't handle one meeting. You didn't just fire me, Matteo. You tried to erase me, then sold out everything I built when it backfired." Victor held up a hand, silencing us both, and nodded toward the boardroom. "Inside. Now." The meeting was a bloodbath. I laid it all out. Matteo's call to Pierce, the expansion plans he'd leaked, the Luxhaven clause that made me untouchable. The board listened, stone-faced, as Victor played the recording. Matteo's voice, frantic, promising Evan everything we've got. When it finished, the room was dead silent. Matteo tried to bluff, said it was a misunderstanding, but the evidence was ironclad. I didn't gloat, just sat there, watching him squirm. Victor finally stood. "You're suspended, effective immediately," he said to Matteo. "Board'll decide your fate tomorrow. Get out." Matteo stared at him, then at me, his face a mix of rage and disbelief. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. But it wasn't over. Luxhaven was still on the brink. I left the boardroom and headed straight for my old office, pulling up my contacts. Priya, the client's CEO, picked up on the second ring. "Elena," she said, her voice cool but curious. "Heard you had a rough day," I smiled, switching to Spanish, her native tongue, a trick I'd learned over late-night project talks. "Rough for some," I said. "I'm back, Priya. Luxhaven's still yours if you'll have it. My signature's ready." She laughed, soft and surprised. "You're a hell of a woman, Elena. We're in. Same terms, your lead. Meeting tomorrow?" "Done," I said and hung up, leaning back in my chair. Victor found me there an hour later, the office quiet now, the storm past. "You saved us," he said, slumping into the seat across from me. "Priya's on board, deal's locked, Matteo's out. For good, if I've got any say." I nodded, but I wasn't done. "You owe this company more than a save, Victor," I said. "You let him run wild and I paid for it. We all did. That can't happen again." He met my eyes, weary but steady. "It won't. You've got my word." I stood, grabbing my bag. "Good, because I'm not here to clean up messes. I'm here to build something better." As I walked out, I passed Matteo's empty office. His jacket was still slung over the chair, like he'd be back any minute. He wouldn't. I'd come in today not as the woman he'd fired, but as the one he couldn't break, and I'd made damn sure he'd never forget it. The office felt different the next morning, lighter somehow, like the air had finally cleared after days of smoke. I walked in early, coffee in hand, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel that quiet pressure in my chest, the weight of proving myself over and over. Matteo was gone, his office stripped bare by the time I'd left last night. The board had called it suspension turned to termination, no fanfare, no second chances. Victor had stood by his word, and I'd stood by mine. Luxhaven was back on track, signed and sealed after a smooth meeting with Priya that afternoon. But this wasn't just about saving a deal anymore, it was about what came next. I settled into my old desk, temporary until they set up the new director's office Victor had promised. The promotion letter sat in my bag, Director of Creative Strategy, reporting straight to him. I hadn't asked for it, hadn't even hinted at it, but when he slid it across the table yesterday, I didn't hesitate. "You've earned it," he'd said, and for once, I didn't argue. I'd spent 15 years at Alvarez Designs, pouring my soul into every project, every client, every late night hunched over sketches. I'd stayed quiet too long, thinking that was the way to keep the peace. But silence had nearly cost me everything. My job, my dignity, my work. Not anymore. By noon, I'd started making changes. I called a meeting with the team, not the board, just the people who'd been in the trenches with me. Carla, the junior designers, the coordinators who'd kept things running while Matteo flailed. "We're doing this differently now," I told them, leaning against the conference table. "No more guessing who's got your back. If you've got ideas, speak up. If something's wrong, report it. No fear, no fallout." They nodded, some smiling, some still wary. But I could see the shift. I pitched a training fund too. Money set aside for the young designers, the ones like I'd been at 23, full of fire but no roadmap. Victor signed off on it by lunch. "Whatever you need," he said, and I knew he meant it. Word about Matteo spread fast. Last I heard, he was sniffing around smaller firms out west, but his name was mud here. Some whispered Victor had made a few calls, kept the industry chatter quiet. A father's last shield, maybe. I didn't care. He'd tried to bury me, then the company, and he'd lost. That was enough. My inbox filled up over the next few days. Congrats from colleagues, quiet thank yous from staff who'd watched it all unfold. One email stood out. A junior I'd trained years ago, now at a rival firm. "You showed us what standing up looks like," she wrote. "Thanks for not quitting." I read it twice, then archived it. It wasn't about thanks, it was about knowing I'd left a mark. That evening, I stood by the window in my new office, still half unpacked, watching the skyline glow as the sun dipped low. 15 years ago, I'd walked into Alvarez Designs with a portfolio and a dream, thinking hard work would be enough. It wasn't. I'd been dismissed, underestimated, almost erased by a guy who thought power came from a title, not competence. But I hadn't broken. I'd fought back, not with screams or revenge, but with the quiet strength of knowing my worth. That moment I'd smiled at Mateo and walked out, that was when I'd won, even before the contracts and the boardroom showdowns. He couldn't take that from me, and he never would. I turned back to my desk, a blank sketch pad waiting. Luxhaven was done, but there'd be more. New projects, new challenges. I'd build them my way, with a team that trusted me and a company that couldn't afford to forget me. Mateo had thought he could rewrite my story. Instead, he'd handed me the pen. I picked it up, flipped to a fresh page, and started drawing.